you, Julie. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Breckland's Licensing Committee on Wednesday, the 20th of October. I would just mention, could you please make sure that your mobile phones are switched off? Otherwise, there's a fine to the chairman's charity. We've had the fire alarm test, so that won't be happening. Members, could you please remember to turn on your microphones when wishing to speak and then turn them off when finished. Julie, sorry, could we just go through the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October, please? If we just go through page by page, page 4, page 5, if I can turn it over, page 6, and page 7. Does anybody have any issues to raise on those minutes? No? That's fine. Thank you very much. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Chairman, I have no apologies.
Claire said she'd be a bit late, but she is on her way.
Thank you, Tina. Do we have any urgent business, Josie? No? And do we have any declarations of interest from any members? And do we have any non-members here wishing to address the meeting? We have Councillor Bambridge. Thank you very much, Gordon, for sparing the time to attend. And we will move on to the first item on the agenda, which Josie will be presenting. It's the revised taxi policy and procedures. Josie, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the purpose of the meeting today is to review the responses to the revised taxi policy following the consultation and agree the revised taxi policy and recommend the policy to the Council for adoption. So just for background, the Department for Transport published its statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards in July 2020. A copy is attached as Appendix A. Licensing authorities must have regard to the standards document when setting and revising their policies. The government has indicated that authorities are expected to implement the new standards unless there are compelling local reasons not to. The last full review of the Breckland Hackney carriage and private hire taxi policy and procedures took place in 2006. There have been interim changes since then. So a review of the current policy has been taken with the DFT standards being taken into account. And it's probably prudent to point out at this point, although it doesn't say in this report, we have only taken the DFT standards into account and some other sections. We haven't taken the vehicle standards into account yet. So the draft revised taxi policy as attached as Appendix B. Currently, there are a number of different documents. We have a policy, handbooks, interim changes through committee, etc. This policy seeks to have everything in one place in a single document for transparency. The main change has been to the layout of the taxi policy and procedures. The revised policy includes the agreed DFT standards and some new updated sections as listed below. So the application and renewal process has been detailed for clarity. The vehicle specification has been modified for all vehicles rather than separate sections. That just means that Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles and exec vehicles have been put into one section. A diabetes policy has been added to enable officers to grant a licence to an applicant or driver meeting the criteria set out in this section, as additional conditions would need to be applied to the licence. The NR3 policy details have been added. This details how and who will check, use and update the National Register of Revocations and Refusals. The Code of Good Conduct for licensed drivers has been updated to include a dress code, safeguarding training and an annual declaration. The convictions policy has been updated in line with the DFT and the Institute of Licensing recommendations. An intended use policy has been added to enable the licensing department to check that a driver, operator or proprietor intends to work in the Breckland area, and that the private hire operator conditions have been updated in line with the new DFT standards. It's anticipated that the vehicle specification section will be reviewed at a later date alongside the council's sustainability strategy to help tackle climate change. Just as an addendum to that, it's anticipated that that will be spring, summer next year. The revised taxi policy was approved by the licensing committee on the 21st of July to go out of consultation, which took place between the 26th of July and the 5th of September 2021. All taxi and private hire license holders and consultees were contacted via email or post. The consultation was also on the council's website. A series of Zoom meetings were offered and held with the trade to explain what changes were being proposed. There were 2 responses received to the consultation as follows. The first one is, after reading the document, I think I speak for many taxi drivers when the one change that we would like to see is to have tinted rear windows allowed so that we can then purchase better taxis. At the moment, we're very restricted. They are very restricted. It's very hard to get a new car which doesn't come with factory fitted tint with, I think they mean without. Doesn't come with factory fitted tinted windows. And the second comment was, I think we should include the criteria on vehicle age and emission standards set out on pages 42 to 44 in the attached minutes from 2019. This will make provision to ensure the vehicles are safe and of a suitable standard for public use. I did attach as Appendix C pages 42 to 44 of the report presented to the licensing committee on the 13th of November 2019, which is referred to in the response to above. Those responses received relate to vehicle specifications. The DFT standards have not included any vehicle specification requirements in the current standards. As stated in 1.6 above, it's anticipated that the vehicle specification section will be reviewed to incorporate both national standards and the council's sustainability strategy on climate change. It is currently planned to do this in 22-23. The timeframe outlined for implementation of the revised taxi policy and procedures is as follows. Today's committee will consider the results of the consultation and any amendments considered for agreement and then recommend to full council adoption of the revised policy. The 9th of December is the full council that recommendation, if given, will go to, and then the intended implementation date would be the 3rd of January. So options available to committee today are, having regard to all the information provided, members have the option to approve the revised taxi policy without any changes and recommend the final version to council for adoption at the full council meeting on the 9th of December for the revised taxi policy to become effective on the 3rd of January, or to make amendments to the revised taxi policy and recommend the final version for adoption at the full council meeting on the 9th of December for the revised taxi policy again to become effective on the 3rd of January, or to do nothing. The reason for the recommendation is that the DFT standards must be considered by the authority and implemented unless there are compelling local reasons not to. Barry Spear, Parliamentary Undersecretary of State, has advised these standards must be considered by January 22. The current policy document has been revised alongside the DFT standards and in consultation with the licensing team. To do nothing would leave the council having to explain to the DFT why none of those standards have been applied and leave us with a policy that is in excess of 14 years old and no longer fit for purpose. The expected benefits are that Breckland is a mainly rural area and the licensed hackney carriage and private hire drivers and operators provide a vital public service where many people do not have access to other transport provision. The revised taxi policy will give us a strong framework for making decisions, ensuring that public safety is the primary consideration when licensing individuals, vehicles, operators and proprietors. It will provide us with a fit-for-purpose document that allows complete transparency on how we operate the taxi licensing function. So the constitutional and legal implications are that the DFT have set these standards to ensure that the licensing of the taxi trade is dealt with by every licensing authority in a similar manner to standardise the industry. Every licensing authority must have regard to these standards and be able to evidence that they have been considered by the licensing authority and reasons given for any standard not adopted. If the licensing authority does not consider these standards, we have been advised that action may be taken against the authority. And finally, the recommendation is that the licensing committee review responses to the draft taxi policy and procedures following public consultation and agree the revised taxi policy with or without further revision and recommend the final revised taxi policy to council for adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Members, have you managed to look through the vast amount of the policy in front of you? And if you have, do you have any questions? Philip?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't managed to go through all of it, but I would like to support the policy. I still remain a bit disappointed that we've not been able to include more to reduce emissions and include the age policy that we had in 2019 and do a bit more in terms of reducing climate change. So I think I'm pleased to hear that you're going to do it in 2022, and I hope it's spring 2022 rather than later in the year.
Thank you, Philip. And obviously, officers and myself, we are very aware of the concerns, the valid concerns that you raise. But working with the drivers, I think especially after the terrible 18 months that many people have had business-wise, that, you know, we must do our best to work with them to ensure that nothing is too strict, which might affect them being able to work and earn money and support their families. But the officers are very, very well aware of you know, what is coming up, and they will work with the drivers and ensure that the sooner that we can all become compliant, the better. Are you, any other questions, Philip, at the moment?
No other questions. I think it's always probably going to involve some costs, some pain for some people along the way. And, you know, I don't want to advocate any harsh measures, but I think we just need to be showing a lead on where we intend to be going.
And then I think I don't know enough because I'm not a mechanic, and I don't know enough about electric vehicles and things like that. But I was in London on Monday, and one of the black cab drivers that I was with was telling me, I asked about how business was, how the traffic was, etc., etc. And of course, as many of us are aware, that, you know, they are batteries anyway. But because the Mayor of London has tried to, or actually has shut off an awful lot of streets in London to traffic apart from buses, it's made the journey of some of the black cabs much longer in order to get to their destination. And I may be completely wrong, but I think he said that on average that he could probably get 60 miles out of a charge. And the difficulty is with the charging points, because they don't have specific taxi charging points. And he said it's a very anxious time with the extra miles that we have to do in order to get to our destination, which actually in itself I don't suppose is very green, really. But anyway, thanks very much, Philip, for your comments. Does anybody else have anything to say? Susan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to raise that there were a couple of points in the consultation. One was about tinted windows. Has that been resolved?
It has, Susan. I'm going to hand over to Josie because she's the expert on it.
There we are, cooking now. So to answer that question, because tinted windows form part of the vehicle specification, we haven't tackled that part of it yet. It's something that we will review in the vehicle specification. The current window tint policy is there for safety of the public. We understand obviously manufacturers' specifications have changed a lot since that policy was introduced in 2007, and hence the reason for wanting to look at the vehicle specification next year. It was just not possible to do everything this year because the policy hadn't been reviewed for so long. They do, but I think we have to remember as a licensing committee that public safety is of paramount importance. That's what we're here to ensure. So we will look at it, and we will look at what's happening nationally and what's happening locally with other local authorities as well. And also at how easily, readily available alternative windows are to drivers to see how that works out. Now, it may well be that the DFT actually come out. My understanding is that there may be some vehicle specifications that come out. We haven't received a definite on that yet, so we're just waiting to hear. But we will certainly be reviewing it. I know it's a gripe with the drivers.
Sorry. Yes, I just have it's just another query. I noticed that there were lots of things that we have to do as a council, like ensuring that people's language, they can understand the regulations and so on. I just wondered, has that been a problem in the past?
Okay. It's just waiting for the button to go green, isn't it? So we haven't had an issue with that to date, which is why we've not introduced a language test for our drivers currently. We decided mentioned at the last committee that we would keep that under review because it is a recommendation by the DFT, but we don't feel that it's needed at the moment. Every driver is seen by a licensing officer before any license is issued. They have a conversation with them. They go through the remainder of their documents when they bring them in. So nobody is ever given a license without seeing and talking to a licensing officer first. If we ever had any, I guess, worries about that kind of thing, then we would not issue the license until we were certain that English was as it should be.
And on Susan raising that, JC, I presume, which I should never do, that obviously you make a comparison to the person that you're seeing and the photographic evidence.
Yes, all of those checks are carried out. We do the enhanced DBS check. All documentation is checked before it even goes off for the DBS. So there is no imitation game possibility with drivers that are given a license in Breckland Council.
Very reassuring. Thanks very much, JC, and thank you for the question, Susan. Does anybody else on the committee? Tristan.
It was just with regards again to the consultation and the fact that there were just 2 responses received. As I read the paper, all taxi and private hire licence holders and consultees were contacted. That would suggest to me that the document was probably met with a lot of agreement, which is why the number of responses was so low, which I would suggest is a positive.
I certainly hope so. We didn't receive any positive responses, but that's not unusual in the taxi trade itself. We did also schedule 6 meetings. We had attendees at 3 of them. My guess is that word of mouth got round about what the changes were. We understand that the biggest change for the drivers is the vehicle specification, and that's really what they're looking for. So I can't speak for all of them, obviously, but they had the opportunity to consult on this document, and we will be doing exactly the same when we go out with there'll be a consultation for the vehicle specification.
Thank you, JC. I was just going to say, team, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I can concur with that. I think most people, if they've got an issue with the taxi policy, would be, saying something against it if they had the tying up of the loose ends of making the drivers absolutely above reproach and everything like that. It's tying up all those loopholes. So it's protecting the drivers themselves at the moment, the ones the good ones, and it's stopping the baddies coming in, if that makes sense. The only thing I've heard as well, same as I have spoken to Josie about this, is the tinted windows. That's one of the things, but again, that's vehicle specification, which we're hoping we're looking at later on. One of the reasons that I think it's causing so much of a problem, I didn't know this, but it makes sense. The drivers want leather seats because it makes cleaning the vehicle much cleaner, and it's much more hygienic if anybody has an accident. You go yourself to buy a Ford Mondeo or something like that, you want leather seats, and it automatically comes with tinted windows. So it's then a cost to the driver to get the windows changed. And that, I think, is what the policy we're going to look at next year is going to be looking at. So hopefully we can address that then, but any other comments that the drivers come back with. But for the actual tying up all those loose ends, this is addressing every little loophole that nasty people can come in and sort of undercut the good drivers, and it's going to make it a lot better. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of argument on it. There might be when we do the vehicle specification, but not at the moment.
Thank you, Tina. Gordon, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I don't think so. Marion, I'm very happy with the policy as it's written down, and I'm pleased the committee is. I would just like to say thank you to the committee members. I think most people don't realise how much this council owes to the licensing committee for what it does. So well done, all of you. I've been on this committee before, and I do appreciate all that you're doing. And I do agree with what's said about the specification for cars. And that is something that we do need to look at very carefully and consider as a committee very carefully when we come to it. But thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm looking around the room. Everybody else seems content. So committee, we have at point 2 options. Having regard to all the information provided, members have the option to approve the revised taxi policy without any changes and recommend the final version to the council for adoption at the full council meeting on the 9th of December for the revised taxi policy to become effective on 3rd of January 2022. 2, make amendments to the revised taxi policy and recommend the final version for adoption at the full council meeting on the 9th of December for the revised taxi policy to become effective on the 3rd of January 2022. And 3, do nothing. So could I ask if we could agree to approve the revised taxi policy without any changes? Could I ask you to raise your hands? Thank you. That's everyone. And I think that's, anything else you want to add, Josie? No, thank you very much. That's excellent. And I will close the, oh, it's over the page, sorry. It's definitely over the page. Julie, when is the next meeting?
Chairman, it's just the item 7 to note the arrangements for the next meeting on Wednesday, the 12th of January 2022 at 10 AM in the Angley Room here in Deerham.
That's lovely, Julie. Thanks for confirming that. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we will close the meeting of the licensing committee.